Hello everyone. So today we are going to do the second session of the React.js preparation. Now, before going into the session, I'll just do a quick recap of what we have learned in the first session, right? So in the first session, we have learned about what is React and what are the features of React.js like virtual DOM, JSX, then one-way binding, declarative UI, all those things. Then we have learned why React.js came into picture and what are the benefits and drawbacks of React.js. And after that, we have learned about um, like how how can you create a React application and how React.js is different than HTML. And then we have gone through how to set up the system for React.js development, and I hope every one of you have already set up your system, because today will be totally a live coding session. So I require you to set up your system if you haven't yet. Okay, so other than that, I need you to install this particular extension in your browser, so that will help us while developing the React application. Okay, now in the previous session we have looked into some sample codes of React, but anyway, today we'll be going through those things. So we'll be learning more about how we can do coding in React.js and build a complete application. Okay, so this is the course material for second session, which is of today's. So in this one, what we'll first learn is what is JSX. So JSX is a JavaScript extension syntax in which JavaScript and HTML resides together, and it helps us to create declarative reusable components. Okay, now going forward, what we'll do is first we'll create a React application, and then we'll be seeing what is JSX and what are the other things that we have and in the next of the pipeline. Okay, so if you go back to my first session, right, you'll see there I have done Node.js installation and npm package manager installation. After that, the React's installation as well in the uh, global environment. Then we have to just, after you have React installed in your global environment, you can just run this particular keyword npx create React app, then your app name. Okay, so I'll just do that. Let's see. Okay, so npx create React app space my React application's name. So here I'll just give it as React learning. So it will take some time. What it is basically doing is, so this create React app in the background, it is first installing all the dependencies that are required for the React application, and after that it will do create some files and folders and the directory structure for React application, so that we do not have to we do not have to indulge our own time into creating the directory and all. Rather, they will create everything and give it to us. So they'll give us a working sample of the project, and from there what we need to do is we need to tailor it according to our needs basically. So that's what it is doing. There are many packages that will get installed throughout this, so that's why it will take some time. Let's just wait for that. Meanwhile, I'll just quickly give you the recap of the benefits of React. So basically, React's benefits includes the JSX syntax, which makes the life easy because it marries HTML and JS together. So there is no need of keeping separate files for HTML and JavaScript to handle different events. Second thing is React is declarative and reusable. So whatever you create in React, those can be reused in other places as well. Third thing is React provides us a very efficient and smooth UI, because React goes through a lot of efficient algorithms behind, right, like virtual DOM and all. So it creates a very speedy and smooth user experience. Okay, so the installation has finished here, and it is saying all the, so it is giving us some guidelines in here. Okay, so it is telling us like npm start. If you do, then it will start the development server, and all those things it has given. So first what I'll do is basically I'll just clear it up once, and then we'll go into the directory cd react learning, and after that I'll just run it once, npm start. Okay, so to run the project locally you need to run npm start. So when you do it, it will open your browser and run the application in here. So I'll just copy it and I'll just close this incognito mode, and I'll open it in here. Okay, so it has started and we have a simple text in here as well as an icon and a button in here. Okay, so we'll just see how the code looks like, and accordingly we need to change and all. We'll just go through how the code is and what is the directory structure and the structure of the code, and after that we'll customize it according to our need. So here I'll be using VS Code, Visual Studio Code extension, and inside, so I have opened my project inside that, and now I'll just keep on. I'll just give you a brief about what all these things are, and then we'll go into the project creation. Okay. So the first thing will come is readme.md. So in this file you can just skip it. So this is basically official guideline and all those links where you can find some documentation and all. So you can check this stuff, but will not work with it. So basically we'll go into the most important part of the project, that is package.json. So inside package.json you can see what are the things are there, like the main thing is, I know you guys already know name, version, private. So these are basically meta information which tells us about the project itself, like whether the project, what is the name of the project, what is the version, and whether the project is public or private, all those things. And after that the dependencies start. So these dependencies are basically the packages that will be required for this application to run. Okay, so inside these dependencies you see, so first three dependencies, right? So this testing library JSDOM, testing library React, and testing library user event. These three things are basically for unit test cases. Okay, so unit test cases are like whenever you write any particular code, then you can write some test cases for that code, so that you can verify whether the code is working properly before even it goes into live. Okay, and also it ensures there is no regression issue when there is an update to the particular file. Okay, so these three things we will not be using right now because we are focusing on React.js learning, not the unit test cases. So these three things we will not be focusing on. So what we can do is first we can just remove these three things, and we'll remove the we'll remove wherever it is being used as well. Okay, so I'm just removing from here right now. Then we have the React package. React is right now 18, version is 18.2, which we will be using, which is the current one. Then we have React DOM and we have React scripts. So these two things are required mainly for this application, wherever we will be using React's components and all, everywhere it will be used. And React scripts will be used for building the project, running the project, and basically testing the project or rejecting the project. Okay, so these three things we need. After that there comes a package called Web Vitals. So this particular package is used to monitor the performance of the application on the browser, basically from a client side point of view. As the React applications are client side applications, so we need to ensure that they are running to its fullest capabilities. So in order to do that, we need some metrics to understand whether there is any kind of improvements or changes that are required or not. So in order to do that, we require this Web Vitals. This also will not be using right now because we don't need it. So we'll just remove it. Then we have some scripts. So inside scripts, what we have, let's see. First thing is start, which uses this React scripts package, so which we have defined in here. And so so these scripts we can run by like npm start, npm run build, npm test, or npm eject, like that. So first thing is start, which runs the application on the development server, that is the 3000 port of ours. Now one important thing to consider in here is, if you already have some node.js application or some other application which is running on 3000 port, then make sure that you close that application and make this particular port free, then only this application can be run. So now there is a custom logic where you can change this particular port, but right now we will not be changing. Okay, so just make sure that this particular port is not being used that time. So first start is there, which will run the development server. So your application will be hosted in localhost 3000. Second thing is we have build. So when you are deploying something, so after building the whole application, after creating the whole application, when you will be releasing it for products and for people, then it will not be as same as similar to this development. The look and feel will be definitely, but the files and the way it will be bundled, it will be very different, and it will be minified or gzipped, all those things, in order to make it more efficient and fast. And in order to do that, we need to run this build script. So after building it, then only we will be deploying on production. So after that we have test. So test, as I have already told you, to do unit test cases. So as we are not doing it right now, we can just remove it. Also we have eject, right? So eject, what it does is, right now all the bundling, right? So as I have told you, so in order to build something, so whenever we run the application or whenever we are building the application to deploy it on the production, so we are basically calling Babel and Webpack and all those bundling tools in the background. But right now those things are not being managed by me or us, basically. Rather, this React scripts package is handling all those things, right? So when you want to do more changes to the build process itself, and you do not want to use the already existing one, then you have to run this eject keyword. So when you use eject keyword, it will be a one time thing, and it is irreversible, basically. So when you do that, after that you need to maintain all your build process and all your configuration files that are required for the build, like Babel configuration file or Webpack configuration file, all those things you need to manage. So React scripts won't manage those. Okay, so that is one thing. So after that there is a ESLint config. As you might know, ESLint helps us to improve our codes and helps us to uh, basically eradicate any kind of coding errors. So for that we are extending React app. So React, by extending React app, what is happening is, we get any kind of so if we do any kind of wrong things in React, right? So those kind of things will be suggested to us, like to change those particular code bits and all. Okay, after that we have React app Jest. So Jest is the testing library that we had. As we are not using it, we can just remove it. Okay, and after that we have this particular configuration, full configuration browser list. So this is for the testing library itself, like so that when you run the unit test cases, where and all the test cases will be run, and it will be validated throughout. So right now we will be not using that, so I'll just remove this particular thing as well. So the main motto or the objective of this cleaning things are, so we need to focus on only React.js right now, and we need to learn that thing. So that's why I have removed all the unnecessary things that are there. Now I have removed just the package dependencies from here, but there are files where those things are being used. So I'll go into those files and I'll remove them one by one. Okay, so after package.json we have package log.json, which you already know, like whatever you install, all those things logged will be there. Now we have a git ignore, where we have all the node modules, then build folder, all those things we have. Okay, so when you are committing any changes, these files will not be committed. Now we have, so node modules folder, which is for all the dependencies folders. It is there. So this is being managed by the, whenever npm package directory just updates or removes or adds new packages, then it will get updated. Other than that, we have a public directory inside which we will keep all our static files, basically. Okay, So we'll keep all our static files, and whatever file is there, you can directly access it via just using a slash to the host. Say for example robots.txt I need to use, just like here it is there, robots.txt. So I can just say localhost 3000 slash robots.txt, and I can just enter it, and you will be able to see the file in here. Okay, so whatever you put in public directory, it will be accessible by this slash file name. Okay, so that is there. Now we'll come to the most important part of the project, that is source. So in source folder, all the necessary code files, folders and directories and everything about the React.js will be there. So inside that, as you can see, we'll just start from here. So here you see setup tests is there. Okay, so this particular thing, as we are not using any test cases and all, we'll just remove it. So I'll just remove it from here. Then we have report web vitals. As I have told, this is for the browser's efficiency and the performance. This also will delete. Then we have this index logo, so which is for the logo that we see in here, right? So for this logo, now there is some error that is coming, so we'll just go one by one and it will be resolved. So logo we need right now. Then we'll go to index.js. So index.js, if I go there, you see what we are doing is, first we are importing the React package, then React DOM package. These two things are mandatory for any kind of React application. So those two things I have imported. After that, I have imported some CSS file. So this also right now we do not require, but let us just keep it for now. Then we have done an app.js. So app component we are just bringing it. So we haven't learned about components, so we'll just remove it as well. But as I remove it, here also some error is coming because it is being used here. So I'll just remove it. Okay, now here I am importing the web vitals, which file I have already deleted. So I'll just remove this particular line as well, and I'll remove these things as well. So as I do that, I have a very bare minimum React code in here, and I'll just save it for now. But there is no content in here, so I need to render something in here. So we'll come back to it. But as I have removed app.js, and the CSS is also being used in here, and the logo is also being used in here, right? So I'll remove all the three things: app.css, app.js and logo.svg. Okay, so I'll just remove these three things, so it becomes like this. And also this app.test.js also being used in that, so we do not need that. Basically, as we have removed that, so we are not using any test cases also, so we'll just remove it. Okay, so we have removed most of the part, and now we have only two things, like index.css, where we have some CSS installed, written. I'll just format it once. Okay, so I have formatted it, so it looks like this. And in index.js we have just React DOM, and index CSS we have imported. So whatever CSS is there specified in here, it will be there in this page. Okay, so now inside the this one, right, we'll just see what happens in here. In browser we cannot see anything right now, and I'll just open the console also. Let's see if there is any error and all. So there is no error also in the console, but we cannot see anything in here. So as you can see here, when we are rendering the part, right, so what is happening here is, so actually for all the React applications you must have an HTML file. Okay, so that HTML file is being served from this public folders index.html. Okay, so in this index.html we have all the some of the necessary HTML codes, and we have a simple thing in the body. Okay, so I'll just remove all the comments, then you will be understanding. um, so so these are all boilerplate codes basically, which React scripts generates. So we can remove this. Basically we'll just remove this basically. That's so right now let's keep it. Actually some of the stuff like the manifestation and all those things we can keep. So but otherwise these are boilerplate code. Now here you see only one thing we have in here, root div id root. So the whole React application will be rendered inside this particular uh, element basically. So I'll just save it. So what is happening if you see in the index.js, so what we are doing is, so we are just finding the root element in here. So document.get element by root, and that one we are converting it into a React DOM root. Okay, so when you use this React dot create root, that means whatever element we pass into that, that element becomes a root element for the whole application. And inside the root element, whatever you want to render, whatever you want to keep, so that you can give inside like this React.strict mode, React.strict mode, and inside that you can keep any kind of JSX or any kind of component. So right now I'll just give a simple JSX which is like h1 hello world. So this is a the bare minimum and most simple JSX syntax that we know. So I have just written h1 and hello world inside root.render. Okay, so now if we see that, what happens is we are able to see a hello world text in here. Okay, so if you see via elements, see how it looks like. So inside div id root, we are having this hello world. So inside root only, this root element only will get all the things that will be defining inside React's components. Okay, so that is what it will happen. So what we have learned here is, let's just do a quick recap in here. So whenever we have any React application, so it will have a HTML file for sure. In that HTML file will be having an div in the body, and there is no need of other things in here. So this no script tag is just for like if there is no JavaScript enabled in the browser, then this particular thing will come, some error will come. This error will show like you need to enable JavaScript, because React.js is purely dependent on JavaScript. So if you do not have JavaScript enabled, then nothing will be shown there. So coming back to the point, like inside body we'll have an root element for the React application to be contained in, right? So whatever is the root element, inside that only the whole content of the React application will come. Now how to specify that in the JS file? So in the source folder, index.js will always be the entry point for the React application. So inside index.js, what we are trying to do is, we have imported React and React DOM, and by using React DOM's create root function, we are converting that particular root element into a React root element. Okay, into a React root element. So inside that we can render the whole application. So right now what we are doing is, we are just rendering this particular code piece where it will show just a hello world string. Okay, so that's what we are doing. So this is what a very simple JSX expression looks like, and there will be different JSX expressions, like whatever HTML will come and we can put it inside this. So those will be HTML expressions. Okay. So now let's see what next we have. So this was JSX. Now we'll talk about components in React.js. Okay, so the components in React.js are like in HTML what elements are, right? In HTML, elements are like the building blocks for HTML, right? So all the elements, small elements, like whatever elements, each and every element, like div, input, or image, or paragraph, everything, all those things are elements. Okay, but in React, a collection of elements, HTML elements, are called component. A collection of HTML elements, which can mean in that collection only one HTML element is there, right? So that can also happen, but it can be a collection as well. So in HTML, the elements are always individual things, but in React.js, a component can comprise of different elements. Okay, and now we'll just see a normal element, like how a element looks like. Okay, sorry, how a component looks like. So in order to create a component, what we can do is, in here only we will just create a very simple component. What we will do is const, say for example this heading only I need to show, so I'll just say heading component equal to So array function I'm writing, and inside that I'm just returning this JSX expression. Okay, so this JSX expression, and that becomes a component. And in order to show this component inside this, what we'll do is basically like this, like an element. Basically I'll open tag and then I'll self close it. So basically I'll just self close it and it becomes a component. If I save it and if I see it in here, so see, it is still visible in here. Okay, now if we want to know like whether that component is rendered or not, so what we need to do is we have to go in here and see heading component is being shown in here. Only one component is there right now, which is heading component. Okay, so so this was a very basic component that we have created. So component is like, as you can see, this is a block right inside the React application, which can be used inside in any other component or any other render mechanism. Okay, now important thing is the way we declare a component. Depending on that, we have divided components into two parts. So there can be one type, that is function components. Function components are basically just JavaScript functions which are written in a very simple and small manner, and this definitely doesn't have some of the advanced features of React, but it is very quick, and it is very quick to write and very less code to manage, right? And these are the best things for presentational components. Presentational means if we just want to show something on the UI, then functional components are the best option for that. Okay, so right now the component I have written in here, right? So this is a functional component because see, it is a function in which I am returning a JSX expression. So whatever component you write, so whatever functional component you write, it should be always a function which returns a JSX expression, valid JSX expression. That's it. So that becomes a functional component. So it is called function component as well as functional. So sometimes I'll call it function and sometimes functional. Okay, so this is a function component. Okay, so this is one. So this difference is basically because of the syntax. So the syntax is basically like a function, basically a function which is returning a JSX expression. That's why it is called as a functional component. Now there is another kind of component which is called class component. So class component is basically using the ES6 class definition. So to create a class component, what we can do is we can just write like class heading component using class extend. So class components always will extend the component React component library. So it will extend like this, react.component. Okay, and then it will start the definition. So class component, to write a class component, the definition is a bit different. Okay, so inside this we must have a constructor and a render function basically. So inside render function, what we will do is, so one thing I said wrong, this constructor is not a mandatory thing, we can omit it as well. Okay, and inside render function, what we can do is we'll just show this h1 only, h1 return h1, and inside that we'll keep as class component. Okay, so I have just saved it. Now what is happening here is there is a class definition, just like object oriented programming in Java and all. So we have a class named heading component using class, which will always, so class components will always extend react.component. Okay, to get all the pre-existing prototypes, we need to extend it from react.component. So after that, what will happen is inside that we will have multiple things, but among which the mandatory thing is render method. Inside render method, you need to return something, and that return should be a JSX, a valid JSX. So whatever you return from here, it is same like here, whatever you are returning from the functional component. Just that here you are returning it inside a another method that is called render, and in the function component the whole thing return is the actual output. Okay, so this is the render part. So I have kept it as a class component and hello world to show the differentials, right? So I'll just copy this name and I'll just render it. Okay, and I'll save it. As you can see, we are able to see the hello world component as well as the class component. If you see in the, so this particular thing is being managed by the React dev tools, which you can use, this extension you can use. So if you see in the dev tools, right, you can see the first heading component, then the second heading component using class. So these are two different definitions. Based on that only two different names came. So when there is any presentational or view layer changes is there, which means there is no logic as such in that component, it is just to show some things, then you can use the head this function component. And when there is a need of event handling and all the complex things that are happening in the UI, then you can use a class component. Okay, so these two things we can do. Now we'll go to this one. Now so rendering components is so as I have told, right, so I have already told you, so React.js application doesn't have to be doesn't run from the JavaScript file, doesn't run from the index.js file. This is the entry point for the JavaScript, but always the React.js ka root element should be there in the HTML itself. So this HTML, when it gets loaded, right, it will take some amount of time to run this index.js, get all the data and all, and show it to the UI. So definitely there is some very slight but significant delay is there for that, and for that's why like we can use loaders or some lazy loading technologies, all those things we can use in here. So rendering components is this one only. So how we are rendering, so we get the HTML ID for that particular element, and then we specify it inside another variable, and that you use to render other things inside that component. So that is what. Okay. So here one very important things we need to understand is that, so React's most popular feature is it just updates what is required to be updated. So whatever element needs to be updated, it will update that, not the other things. Compared to the JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript or jQuery, what happens in there is whenever you override something, like say for example some inner HTML was there and you just put some other inner HTML, then the whole thing gets updated. But in React what it does is it basically checks for the change, this thing, how much change has been done in that basically from the previous version, and only the changes will be rendered on the browser. So that's why the virtual DOM comes into picture, like whenever there is any need of change, we consider it with virtual DOM, so whether the thing is already available or not, and then we use the only once update. Okay, so if we want to see this, right, if you want to see this, we can implement the same thing in here. So what we'll do is basically I'll create a functional component in here, and I'll do some these things. Say for example here I am creating a current time component, right, and I'll create it as a functional component only. Okay, and let it be like yes, so it's a functional component, and in the return section what I can do is basically I'll just keep a paragraph. And see, whenever you want to use any variable or dynamic JavaScript expression inside the HTML or JSX, we can directly write it down inside two braces, right? So inside that, what I can do is, current time is this, new date. Okay, so new date I am putting. And what we need to do is, after doing the new date, what we can do is this root dot render, right? Inside root dot render, we'll just render this new current time wala. Okay, we have rendered. Now let's see what is happening in the, okay, here the arrow function should be there. Let's see what is happening in the browser. So some error is coming, like React child found object date. So what is happening here is, whenever there is this kind of expression, right, whenever you want to print the variable in there, it needs to be a string or a number so that it can be shown. Otherwise date, it will not be shown. So I'll just add a plus in here so that it becomes a timestamp. So after that, this timestamp is visible here. But the thing is, currently, as this particular thing is not reactive and not changing every time, so that's why it is not updating. Okay, so even though it is changing in the real life, but this code doesn't keep on updating, it will just load it once and then it will go, and whenever you come back, then it will load you again. So it looks like that. Now how to overcome that, how to make it like always blinking? So in order to do that, using these two things, so we can use, like this root dot render is there, right? So this particular thing we can do in every 1 second, right? So then it will be looping. So what we need to do is, so inside set interval I am doing this particular thing. Okay, and also we'll just check what is happening. See, I'm updating it, so every second it is getting updated. Okay, so what I'm doing is, there is a set interval which is calling this current time again and again. Okay, so this p tag is being called again and again, and it is being updated in here again and again. Now let's see in the browser what is happening, because this p tag is also being updated every time, but it is not changing, it is keeping same, just the value is changing. So what is happening here, let's see once in the elements. So if I just increase it, so if you see, what is happening is only this particular thing is being updated. Okay, so not this particular thing is just blinking, but this value is just updating. So React knows how much things are being updated right now, and that just updates only the changing value, not the other things basically. So by that way only, React keeps on increasing the performance of the front end web app. Okay, so this is what it does. Now we'll go to, so this is what, like with the comparing with the virtual DOM, it just changes what is being changed right now. Now there is another thing like component hierarchy. Okay, so the first thing is, before going into component hierarchy, so you have learned about the components, right? Here, as we have written some components in here, right? Heading component, or heading here on component, then here on component. So these all components, right? So in a page, components can't be present in like one by one, right? There can be instances where inside a component there will be another component, and inside that component there will be another component. So there will be multi-level component hierarchy as well, because components are basically building blocks of React. So there will be definitely, they will reside in different levels of the application. So that's why we need a hierarchy, components hierarchy. So how does it look like is, if you see, so say for example there is an application, to do application, the whole thing is a to do application. So the page is a app component which is called to do app. So inside that, the only search part is called search component. Then the list, whole list part is called to do list, and each to do that we have, right, all those things are to do component. Okay. So, and as well as the create to do button and the text area, that are a separate component. So always what you need to do is, in your UI, whenever you see an UI, you need to differentiate, you need to segregate all the small components that you can, and then you have to merge them back by using small code. That's all. If you go on and write for each and everything, then it will be very difficult to manage, as well as a later point of time, we ourselves only, we won't be able to understand that. That's why it is very important that we create small components and manage the project. Okay. So that's what, like, another thing is, there is a principle called single responsibility principle. So that means whenever you, like, how to decide which will be a component, which won't be a component. So whenever you see an UI, right, that time you need to understand like which particular piece of it can behave with a single responsibility, not like a multiple responsibilities and all. It will do a very pretty much straightforward single thing, so that becomes a smallest component in the browser. Okay. So that's what, like, now we'll just do some examples to understand how component hierarchy works. Okay. So say for example here, the current time component is already there, but inside that this is coming, and what we can do is, we'll just show heading component also in here after this guy, right? We have shown it here. Now let's reload it and see it, what is happening. Okay, so hello world, and this thing is coming. Now another thing to notice is, I haven't clicked the reload button, or I haven't reloaded it. Why? Because in this kind of modern front-end applications, right, just like React or Vue, all those things has something called HMR, hot module replacement. So anything, any changes you do in your code, right, so there is a watcher or a listener that are always available in the computer. So which, what it does is, whenever there is any file change in that, in this particular file, then it will just reload it automatically, or rather I would say not reload, but rather so it will just supply the this thing, the module that needs to be replaced. So basically, if this is getting changed, so the below one is getting changed, so the module will get changed with each iterations. Okay. um, okay, so now what we need to do is, basically, so current time we have, and current time is defined in here. So along with that, we are defining another component, heading component, from here. Okay, heading component, or from here. So let's see now. So heading component has already come, and what we need to do is, we need to get the this component, heading component, using class, right? So if we do that, so say for example, already see these two things are like siblings. So, and these are called sibling components only, and if something goes inside something, then it becomes a child component. So here only in the p tag, inside p tag only, what we can do is, we can just keep it like that. Okay, so what is happening in here is, new date is there, and along with that we have a heading components using class component. Okay, so this particular component we have inside this current time. So inside current, even though here current time is there, but it will also render the whatever is there inside of you. Okay, so this one also. So as you can see, this class component is also visible with this dash dash. And if you see the component hierarchy in here, right, in the React.js DevTools, then see heading component is there, and inside that sorry, below that current time is there, and inside current tab heading for comments components using class, this particular thing is there. So that's how we do component hierarchy. Like one will be there, two things will be siblings, then inside something there will be a child component, all those things will be there. So siblings are when two things are residing just beside, and child component is when something is residing under something. Okay, so that is what. Also there is one thing is left, that is how to pass data to components, right? So we have two components in here, right, heading component and this component, but how to send any data from parent to child? So as we already have a parent child relationship going on here, but we need to send some data to these components as well to make this more flexible. Say for example, if we go with the this one, right, functional component. So h1 is hello world, but what if we could specify this particular message? Then it would have been much better, right? So in order to do that, what we need to do is, so in this heading component only we need to pass a prop like title or whatever, it can be of any name. So title is hello from component. Okay. Now title is hello from component, and inside this component also we need to manage that, right? This heading component, inside that how do we get this value? This value is sent via a very special variable that is called props. Okay, so props is something that are gets passed to the particular user. Okay, and inside props all the small things will be there, all the items or the properties that we have defined on the component will be there. Like here we have defined title, right? So title will be here. Okay, so how to define the title in here? It is like this. So we have to just open a curly braces and close a curly braces, and inside that what we can do is props dot this. So that becomes a props. So inside the heading component we are just getting the prop title, and we are just rendering that title inside this JSX expression. So inside a JSX expression, if you want to dynamically show something or a variable you need to put, that means you need to put like this inside curly braces. Okay, now if we just see in the UI what it looks like, so let's see. So inside heading component, we have something called props. Okay, so see inside props we have title hello from component. Okay, so but that particular thing is not being shown. That particular thing is not being shown in here. Why? Let's see why it is not being shown. So inside heading component we have provided a title, but that title is not showing here because we need to pass title in here, but here we have wrongly we have passed this guy. So we have passed this title in here. So now let's see. So see hello from component. So whatever is coming from the props, that is being visible here. Okay, so this is how we pass data from a parent component. Sorry, this parent component is there, and inside that heading component, which is a child component, inside that I'm passing a prop called title, and that title can be accessible to this heading component by using props. This is basically, as this is a functional component, props will come as a argument, the first argument, and inside props only whatever attribute or the property that you define in here, it will come there inside props. Now the same thing is not there in the class based components. Class based components has a different way to get the props. Okay, when you use class based component, then these props are already there in the class, right, in this class, because these are defined using this keyword. So we'll just keep it like this, this dot props dot title. Here also I'm getting a same a prop that is called title. Inside this h1 I'm just writing it. So I haven't passed, so this particular component I haven't passed any props here, but let's see what happens in here. So if I just reload it, right, you see normally in this particular component we already have a title, but in the heading this component there is no props right now. So in order to use that, we need to pass some props in here. That is the title prop I need to pass. So if I pass it like writing like this, so passed from current time. Now let's see. So see, it is coming in here. So what I have done is, inside current time I am using this particular heading component using class, right? So inside that I am passing a prop that is title, okay, and this particular thing, in order to use that, then I am using these dot props dot title. So here only one difference is there with the functional component and the class component. In the functional component you need to have the argument definition in here, then only you will be able to access that, and it will come, all the props will come inside the argument, okay. But in the class component, by default only whatever props you are passing, they will be added to these dot props, and that you can directly use in the render function. So that is the only difference between functional and class based component when there is a prop, when there is a prop that is coming from the parent component. So I hope here we have understood the hierarchy and how we can pass the data through components. To just recap that in a small amount of time, so what we are doing is, we have different components. So we have three different components, two of which are functional component, current time and heading component, and one is a class based component. So the difference between functional and class based is the syntax. Basically functional components are just like a function which will return a JSX expression, but class based components have more properties to it, which is like it will have a render function, then other functions as well, which we'll know in the next sessions. But the thing is, when we have these three components, we can use them inside the rendering function. But here also how we have used it is, this particular component and current time component we have used like siblings. So first this guy, and just after that we have used this particular component. But this class component we have used inside this current time component, so that becomes a child component. So already this whole thing is there, where current time and heading component are sibling components, and inside current time we have this heading component using class component, okay. So that becomes a child component. Now to pass any data inside any kind of components in React, what we can do is, we can pass it through the attributes which are called props. So to pass it from the parent, what we need to do is, we just have to define the prop. Like here the prop name is title and the value is hello from component, okay. And that particular thing we can directly use it here, by as it is a functional component, will receive the all the props, whatever properties you we write here, right, like number equal to 5, okay, number cannot be number, count, say for example count is 5, okay, count is 5. So this thing will also be available inside props.count. If we do, then we'll be able to see that. So inside props all the data will come, whatever attributes we are passing from here. Similarly in the class component also, these dot props will be there, inside which you will be finding all the data. Now in order to show that inside a JSX expression, to show any kind of dynamic expression inside expressions value inside JSX, you need to just have a curly braces, and inside that you need to just specify that data, okay. Similarly in the class component also you have passed the title, which we have used by using these dot props. That's all. So this was the recap for hierarchy as well as the data passing between different components, okay. So now we'll see what else is there. So Yes, so now we have the difference between class components and functional components. As you have already seen, right? So the first difference that you will be noticing, that is the syntax. So the class component syntax is very minimal and it uses just a function which will return a JSX expression. Whereas the class component is different, right? So functional component is just a function with a JSX expression, but the class component is a ES6 class, which is like a object oriented class, and inside that you will have different things. Right now I'm just using a render function, so this is a mandatory thing. So you must have a render function inside which, again similar like this return statement, we will have a return statement and a JSX expression. Okay, so that's how the class component will react. And after that we have state and lifecycle methods. So state and lifecycle methods we will learn in next sessions, but just to tell you, so state is basically to create reactive dynamic values for the components, and those things can be created in both the things. Basically previously when the class when the functional component first came, right, before React 16, there was no options to create any states for functional components, but right now we can create states for functional components, but the syntax is very different. And in the class components anyway, it was always there, the states are always there. And but there is only one thing, that is like in the class component there is extensive use of lifecycle methods, like in a React component, right? So our React component goes through different life cycles. So all those life cycle methods are available in class based components, but functional components doesn't have them. Okay, another major difference was previously it was there, like class components are used for state based functionality, like if there is an event or if some triggering is going on, then we would use class component. And if there is any just a presentational layer or a view, then we would have used the functional component, because previously there are no concept of states in functional components. But right now, as there are different things like hooks and all, like use state hooks and all are present, so this particular difference is not valid anymore. Okay, now the next difference is what we have just studied, that is how we pass props to each of these types of components. So in functional component we pass props using just an argument, but in class components that argument and all are not there, rather it will be directly by default only being available, being enabled inside the this.props property. Okay, so this is how we can access the properties that are props that are passed into class component. So I have already like stated all those things inside this document. You can just go through them, it is very nicely explained, and you can see some examples as well. Okay, so this was basically all our today's session. Just to wrap up, so I'll say like again, so we learned about what is JSX. So JSX are basically extension syntax, which are basically compromising sorry comprising JavaScript and HTML together, and these are used extensively throughout React.js projects. Then we learned about what is a component in React.js, which are basically the building blocks for React.js, and we can use components to build a declarative and usable reusable UI library, okay, or project. Then inside components also we have two kinds of components. One is functional components, one is class components. Functional components are basically just like a function which returns a JSX expression. Class components are ES6 classes in which the mandatory function is render function, which will return a JSX expression. Then we learned how we render the components in React.js application. So in React.js application, there will always be a HTML file, a static HTML file, which will have something like this line. So we'll have a root element inside that HTML file, which will be used as a container for the whole React application. Okay, so to use it as a container or the root for the React application, we use React DOM create root. So it creates the root element for us from this element. So it makes this element as the root element for the application, and inside that element we can render things by just using root.render, and inside that we can just put elements or components or JSX expressions. Okay. Then we learned about how in React, whenever there is any change, then the only thing that is getting changed updates, and other things just be as it is. So that's what we learned as well. So this thing is being done by using virtual DOM. So virtual DOM basically sees what is the difference between the current DOM tree and the upcoming DOM tree that is coming from the React, and it will just render the changes, basically whatever change, whatever difference is there, that part. Then we learned about component hierarchy. That means how we can keep sibling components, and how we can keep child parent component relationships. And then we learned about props, or the short form of properties in React. So by using that we can pass data into child components or different components. Okay. So that's what we have learned, and after that we have learned about the difference between class components and functional components, whereas simple things like syntax, then state and lifecycle methods, and prop passing methodologies has difference. Okay. So this is what our today's session was, and after this we have a very simple assignment for you guys. So what you need to do is, here is a simple this thing, uh, image. So you need to create this particular page where this image will be there as logo component. Then there will be this search box, which will be a word box component. There will be two buttons, both of them will be different components, and a language node component, just like the Google homepage. So this is what you need to create, and I would really suggest you to create so this search button and lucky button. So these two things will be inside a parent component as well, like buttons component you can create, and inside that these two things will be there. So by doing this assignment, what we can achieve is we'll be having a firm idea about how to create different components, and how to keep it inside, like how to keep the hierarchy. Okay. And also another thing I would suggest is, here this particular text should be passed as a properties, as a props from the parent component. So that is it. So that is the assignment. So we'll meet in the next session, and we'll talk about sessions and this assignment as well. Thank you very much.